Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Ealing Road podcast, where on today's show, we're going to be briefly going over the Leicester win away from home to make it 4 on the bounce on the road for Brentford. And we're also going to be going over the Everton 1-1 draw at home. We're recording this on Thursday morning, so fresh reaction to the Everton game. Dan, how are you doing, mate?
All good. Yeah, still can't quite get over the line against maybe better teams in the league, can we? But perhaps we were a little bit fortunate as well to get away with the draw, looking at the chances they had.
Yeah, 100%. Craig, how are you?
Yeah, always enjoy a podcast after a Mark Flekken masterclass. I gotta say that, I tell you.
100%. We're going to talk about Mark Flekken. We're going to talk about the one-on-ones because there were 3, and in all 3, Mark Flekken came out on top. But just before we get going, remember to drop a comment down below, subscribe to the YouTube and Spotify channels, follow us on the socials at the Ealing Road on Twitter, at Ealing Road Pod on Instagram. Tweet of the week. I was kind of struggling for tweet of the week this week because I think we're going to talk about Bryan Mbeumo, the Super Bees. Gaff did a tweet around Mbeumo's form recently. But I thought we could just tackle that in the pod. But I did see this stat from Sam Tabato. I think I'm saying that right. The new guy that's covering Brentford, the journalist that's covering Brentford this season. And he said that Brentford have never won at home in midweek since promotion to the Premier League. And I don't think he's counting Mondays or Fridays. But
the very first one was a Friday, wasn't it?
We've only won one, I think, midweek game in the Premier League, and that was Chelsea away.
One, what, even away from home?
Yeah, one. Chelsea away, I think that's it.
There aren't many, I suppose. Obviously, the Arsenal opening day of the Premier League was a Friday night, if we are counting that as in the week and in the evening. But
so it's Tuesday.
There's not many home games in the Premier League every season in midweek, is there? So compared to the Championship, anyway. So I guess you can.
It's the reason to get relegated
a little bit. Yeah.
What about the West Ham away game where De Silva and Tony scored and we won 2-0? Was that not midweek or was that a Monday? Might have been a Monday, that. Let us know in the comments. Fact check us. Because he says, I was just surprised that we've never won a home midweek game. I would have thought maybe it's maybe I am just thinking about Mondays and Fridays, but I thought we'd been quite good at home, like under the lights. But I don't know. I just thought it was a funny stat. But we'll get on to the Leicester game. I thought we'd keep this section very brief and we can kind of touch on some of the performances of the players from both games across the Leicester and the Everton game. But Craig, I'll come to you first on Leicester. How was it? Did you enjoy the performance? Obviously, Leicester this season, I found his post-match comments, Rude's post-match comments, just like the weirdest thing ever to hear, especially if you're a Leicester player, when he said, we have to accept that every team we come up against is a better team than us. But having said that, we can only beat what's in front of us, and 4 wins in a row on the spin, Craig.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, 4 wins away from home on the spin. I'm so incredibly disappointed that we only scored once in the second half. I can't believe it. The first 30 minutes was fantastic. Well, saying that, I don't know if anybody else would agree with me. The first 10 minutes when they came out, Leicester, they had a fair few chances. Vardy had a few chances himself when he's turned Pinnock inside out a little bit.
Yeah.
And Flekken makes another good save there. But when they came out and they was on top a little bit in the first 10 minutes, thought, okay, this is going to be a bit more difficult than what it seemed. But as soon as we got that first goal, as soon as Wissa scores, there was only one-way traffic from then on out for the rest of the game. 3 really quick goals in the first half basically set the tone of the game. It was going to be easy once we got the first, but there's no easy games in the Premier League. But once we got that first one, it was routine. It was training ground stuff. It was routine. It was easy football. They never threatened us, even in the second half. I don't think they registered a shot on target in the second half, but we could have had 5, maybe 6. It could have been another Southampton, but they were bad. We were good. We were good. We were clinical in the first half. We did what we needed to do, but Leicester were bad. They were real bad.
It was basically a repeat of the home game, really, in terms of that training match kind of feel to it. But Dan, one silver lining from that game, and one thing that stood out for me was that Bryan Mbeumo listens to the pod. He must do, because you said on the last one that he starts to need to vary his finishes, and he did just exactly that, Dan.
Yeah, so really that's my assist and one less for Damsgaard, unfortunately for him. But no, it was a good win. I think we probably took our foot off the gas a little bit, especially when we made the changes towards the end. We had a lot of young players on the pitch, and I think if we weren't playing 5 days later, then maybe we would have put our foot down a bit more and ended up getting 5 or 6, which is probably what we deserved. I think against poorer teams in the Premier League, that front four especially looks so good. They look top 6 level at times together when they're in full flow, when they're dynamic. It helps that Leicester's centre backs in particular are terrible. Akoli and Wout Fass, who almost got an own goal again. And I feel like he scores an own goal every week, even though I don't watch Leicester. I feel like Wout Fass always scores an own goal. But yeah, it was good. It was solid. I kind of come to expect that now. When we take on these lower sides in the league, we've been very consistent this season when it comes to beating the sides that perhaps on paper we are technically better at than. And that's not always been the case in the previous seasons. I think where we struggled this year is getting those results against the bigger and better teams, even like Everton last night, who are clearly on a very good run of form. But yeah, brilliant win. You can't fault it. We came and we played, and the expectation of us perhaps being the favourites for that game, you could see Leicester's heads go down once we scored the first. Some of the goals are way too easy from a Leicester point of view. Even the Norgard header, how they letting him just freely run to that near post and get that shot away. Bryan Mbeumo, yeah, great finish. That's what we want to see in the far corner. Doesn't always have to go near post. Make the keeper guess a little bit. Why they showed him in there as well. They didn't really try to show him down the line at all. I don't know, but as you said, we can only beat what's in front of us. Very good win, and like I said, it shows where we are in the table. We are comfortably better than those bottom 5 or 6 teams at the moment. And if we can just push on against these better sides and our fixture list gets harder again in the next month or two, then perhaps we have a shout of getting into that top 8. But that's the next step that we haven't really quite taken yet.
You mentioned the better sides there, Dan. We came up against Everton last night, and at the start of the season, not one of the better sides, and our performance at Goodison Park was really, really good. Down to 10, gritty performance. Probably had the better of that game. But last night, Craig, they came to town off the back of 6 unbeaten under David Moyes. I think they've lost against Villa and they've won 5, drew against Man United last weekend. So it was a difficult one to call, to be honest. Going into it, Everton at home is a bit of a bogey team for us anyway. I don't think we've beaten them that much away either. So Everton in general, Sean Dyche particularly, we tend to struggle against his teams. But coming into it, if we're going off Thomas Frank's record against David Moyes, then we should have been confident. But with their form in mind, it was difficult to call. They played well in the second half. We played well in the first half. What are your initial thoughts, Craig, from the result last night?
When I came out of the ground, I was actually a little bit disappointed that we hadn't won the game. But as I was walking back to the car and I was thinking about it and having conversations with other fans around us, I kind of come to the realization that we was actually quite fortunate. 1, to go in at half time being ahead, and 2, to come away from the game with a point. And a lot of people saying that's 2 points dropped, and really, I think it's a point gained for us. As you just said, Everton are on a great run of form since David Moyes took over. They are a different team to what they were under Sean Dyche. They looked a bit more attacking. They didn't look so. They are a defensive team. Let's not ignore that. But they looked a bit more efficient going forwards. They was creating chances. I mean, I know we're going to talk about it, but the chances that Beto had, when Mark Flekken keeps us really in the game in the first half, because if Mark Flekken hadn't made those changes, that could have been a 2-1, 3-1 goal that Wissa gets to get us back into the game. And then again, it's a different story, isn't it? But overall, I'm happy that we got a point. I'm happy that we didn't lose at home. I think it's 3 unbeaten in a row, maybe 4. I can't remember. I think we lost the home game, didn't we? It's 3 unbeaten now. And with the games that we've got coming up, as Dan rightfully pointed out, it's good that we pick up a little bit of form in all the games that we've got. Start picking up points at home again, like we did at the start of the season, against these difficult teams that we've got coming up, and keep up the run of form that we've got away from home. And we'll give ourselves false hope moving into sort of the last 10 games of the season that we've got somewhat of an opportunity for something magical, shall we say. But yeah, overall, I'm quite happy with the point now upon reflection. But we've got to be taking chances at home, man, against teams that are in and around us. And I know that I'm saying in and around us, Everton they're only 6 points behind us. But yeah, it was frustrating at times as well. And it was much like the Spurs game. I don't know if you agree, where we're putting cross after cross after cross into the box, where they've got, O'Brien, Branthwaite, Tarkovsky against, after Schade went off, against Wissa and Mbeumo. They're not going to win those headers. We have to vary our style of play and play through the lines that they set up, which can be more difficult because we're not a very tall team going forwards, so we're not going to be winning those headers. We need to vary it up a little bit more.
Dan, what did you think? I actually thought that something that impressed me about the West Ham game was that when we went 1-0 up, we went for the kill in that game, and we had chances to bury it, and we probably could have been 3 or 4 up before half time. Obviously, the massive caveat is that we scored right before half time, so there was always going to be a 15-minute break in between Wissa's goal and whatever play we came up with in the second half. But were you disappointed with the second half in terms of our showing going forward?
A little bit. I think at half time, there's very much a feeling that things are going our way. In terms of Flekken saves, we got away with it a little bit there. On another day, another striker would have scored 1 or 2 in those situations, or Flekken perhaps doesn't save those. And then we score at the perfect time when Everton can't respond, where we can go into the break 1-0 up, and given what happened before, perhaps a bit fortunate to do so. So it is a shame that we didn't quite start in the same manner second half. I think Everton also performed much better than West Ham did, and it was always going to be more difficult. Even in that first half, we weren't creating chances still as freely as we did against West Ham. And I think it is a point gained, but it's also 2 points lost in terms of where we want to be and our aspirations this season. And there is a bit of a points gap between us and where we want to be. And it kind of reminds me a little bit of when we kept finishing 9th in the Championship, when with 10, 15 games to go, there was an outside chance of getting to the playoffs. But I'm not sure whether we as fans, or perhaps even the players at times, truly believed that they could put the run required together to get into those places. And that's what it feels a little bit to me right now. I just don't know whether we've got that extra level to get the results that we need to get against the better teams to plug that gap. And there's so many teams in and around us, but that's just an extra team who could go on a run above us and take those places instead of us.
We're going to talk about the kind of bigger picture in terms of the teams around us, because it is incredibly tight, sort of from 3rd all the way down to 10th. Obviously, if we'd have got 3 points last night, then we would have kept the pace. But as we kind of know, results the table's changing week by week, and we've got a chance when we play Villa in a couple of weeks to take points off them, who are directly above us in the table. But we're going to talk about the big picture later on in the pod. I do want to talk about No Norgard before we get into the one-on-ones and Ethan Pinnock. No Norgard in the starting lineup due to concussion against Leicester, and having watched that incident back from the Leicester game, he gets absolutely clattered by that Leicester player. Smacks his head off the floor, so I'm not surprised that he was out. But Yarmo came in, acquitted himself well, I thought, especially considering how when Vitaly Janelt and Yarmo started together as that kind of double pivot, we have looked incredibly open at times. And to be fair, last night, especially in the second half, Everton broke away with a lot of pace from their kind of defensive third through our midfield, because we were kind of so pushed up the pitch. But Craig, Yarmo's performance in general, we'll probably talk about him throughout, but I thought he did well.
Yeah, and I don't think that he really ever does poorly. He's one of those players that we've had conversations about Janelt and things like that in the past, where he kind of comes in and just does his job, goes quietly about his business. It doesn't light the world on fire, but he doesn't ever have a really bad game. But I thought that he stepped in, he did really well. There was a chance right at the beginning of the game, wasn't there, where he does a fantastic turn in midfield. But he does that quite a bit, actually. Watching him, he takes opportunities to get the ball and progress it, which is good. But Norgard was a really big miss, I thought, actually going into this game, knowing that they've got a lot of big tall and a lot of height in their team. Norgard would have actually been really good for us. But Yarmo's one for the future for sure, and the fact he's getting a lot of minutes this early into his Premier League career is really, really great for him.
Still only 20, by the way. I think a lot of people forget how young he is to be kind of starting in the Premier League. And there were people saying that he needs to go out on loan at the start, like kind of because we had so many midfielders. I just don't think he's better than a loan. He's definitely not first choice ahead of like Christian Norgard. There's an argument to be made that he should be starting instead of Vitaly Janelt, but we've had that argument before. I think it's fair to say. Let's chat about these one-on-ones then, Dan, because. And we could talk about Ethan Pinnock in general. I don't want to say, and I said this in a TikTok, I don't want to say the Carragher leave the football before the football leaves you, because I think that's harsh, and I think he deserves more respect than that because of what he's done at Brentford. But the slip, I actually thought he was lucky to get, because if Beto stays down, I think he gets sent off, which would have really turned the game in a different way. So credit to Beto for staying up, but he's at fault for both of them, Dan. And I don't think anyone wants to admit it, but I do think maybe we've seen the best of Ethan Pinnock.
Yeah, it's actually really sad. Only last year he was our best player, and we all voted him as fans player of the season. So it just shows how quickly this can creep up on you. And perhaps over at Manchester City, we're seeing the same with some of their top players. It's sad. I mean, I guess with the first one, I saw a few players actually slip over off the ball in the first half. And I guess that could happen to anybody. And like you say, it would have been really hard for him to be sent off because he fell and Beto almost fell over him falling. But I agree. I was really worried that if Beto stayed down, that would have been a red card. The second one, he's just caught in no man's land. He's like going to try and engage.
It was a weird decision that.
On, but he's not near them. And he leaves a gaping hole in defence, especially because Collins has gone to engage with, I think, the first header. So he's got to stay in position and he's got to be ready. And then, obviously, second half, it kind of happened again with, and that was almost the most notable one because he had quite a substantial head start on Beto, and the pace isn't quite there anymore, and he just seems a bit slow and sluggish. And it's really, really sad to see. I think this was probably the game easily the most this season that we've seen him exposed. We've seen him exposed in parts at times, but generally he's played okay this season. I think for me, this is a game, and I think back to a year or two ago when Ben Mee played. I think it was against Chelsea, and he got absolutely rinsed that day too. And we could see that his pace had gone that day. And I feel this could be that day for Ethan Pinnock, unfortunately. And I think, do we now need to think about if Vandenberg's going to be out? Do we need to think about giving Coyote a start and moving Ayer across to cover that? And also, this will probably be Ben Mee's last season, I assume. Does Pinnock play that role next season that Ben Mee is playing this season as someone that's perhaps a bit more influential in the changing rooms, but doesn't get as many minutes? But it's very sad. He's been so good for so long, and we all know that. I think there's not one person who's going to really go out and slate him because he has been such a good player for us. We don't know what effect his recent injuries could have had on him and whether that slowed him down that bit more. But he's had a great career. He's gone from the very bottom to the very top. He's probably achieved more than he thought he would achieve at that stage in his career. And like we say, we can't forget how good he's been for us over the years. But this game in particular felt like one of those games where it really became clear that he's just not at the levels he was. And I don't think he'll get that back. I don't see how we can get that back at his age.
Anything to add to that, Craig? I thought that was a nice tribute, Dan, in terms of what Ethan Pinnock's done for Brentford. So I think it wouldn't be wild to say that he's been the best centre half of the club basically since he joined, consistently in the Championship and in the Premier League. But anything to add to that, Craig?
Just the level of consistency that Ethan Pinnock has brought, and he definitely raises the players of those around him. All I'm doing straight away is thinking of the partnerships that we've had in central defence. And when you look back over the last sort of six or so years. You know, when you think about Pontus Jansson, you think about Nathan Collins, you think about Ben Mee, there is always one consistent with those three players, and that is Ethan Pinnock. And Pontus Jansson, please correct me if I'm wrong, said when he left or while he was here that Ethan Pinnock is the best centre-back that he's ever played with. And as Brentford fans, we think about all the influential signings that we've had, Ivan Toney, Pontus Jansson, Bryan Mbeumo. But Ethan Pinnock is and will go down as one of the greatest Brentford players to have ever played for this football club. And it is a sad thing to see. But he's been one of my favourite players over the last sort of 5 years. And I'm glad that he got his opportunity to play in the Premier League as frequently as he has. But yeah.
For sure. I think let us know in the comments how you guys are feeling about Ethan Pinnock, because I'd imagine there'll be some people listening to us kind of writing him off and saying he's had one bad game. But I do feel like there has been multiple occasions this season where he's been.
It wasn't just
one. It's been consistently over the season. He's been done by Vardy. I think in the home game against Vardy, when he just like completely whacked him off the ball for their opener, and then he got skinned twice in the away game recently. We won 4-0, but it's not like a knee-jerk reaction from us. I do think it's been coming. But let us know what you think of Ethan Pinnock. Obviously, in that half, Mark Flekken makes the save, which is a very good save. He ends up making another one in the second half. I'll hand over to you for some Flekken love, Craig, because I've criticised him for his 1v1 ability. And I actually think Thomas Frank said in his post-match that he's one of the best 1v1 goalkeepers in the league. And I know that he's obviously inclined to say that with Mark Flekken being his player. But I've criticised him going down too early and making that dinked finish a lot easier for players. But credit to him, Craig. Goalkeepers Union, Mark Flekken love, take it away.
So since we beat Ipswich 4-3 and they scored one of their goals with that dink sort of finish where he goes down a little bit early, nothing in my mind, nothing springs to mind of that happening since then. And you are right, he did used to go down quite early, and he opens that door for strikers to do that. But by standing up, staying on his feet for as long as he did for both of those Beto chances in the first half, it puts indecision into a striker's mind. And that was so clear to see, especially with the first one, because Flecken's practically on the edge of his penalty area, and Beto just does not know what to do. And it's almost like he tries to chip it around him, and Flekken gets his body behind it in a perfect way. I'm just glad that now we're getting to the point, and I've said it throughout this season, that he's showing his worth and winning us points.
Yeah.
Now, people might argue that this is 2 points dropped, but if it wasn't for Mark Flekken, this would have been no points. We wouldn't have got a point from this game, because we could have been 2 or 3 down come half time anyway. So I'm glad that we're now talking about him and his value to the team and winning us points through this season. So I'm absolutely buzzing for him.
Yeah, 100%. I think mainstay in the fantasy team for a lot of people this season, makes a lot of saves. Came up big last night, as you say. Could have easily been a 4-3-1 Everton victory. So big up Mark Flekken, some big saves in that game throughout. We go ahead at the breakdown. That Wissa goal, I just want to talk about, because it was his 13th of the season, which makes it his most prolific campaign in the Premier League to date, first of all. But second of all, the way he, like, watching it on the telly, Met Police Don't Kill Me, but watching it on the telly, it was like he just flew through the air. He kind of jumped over about 3 bodies and then landed on Pickford to make it even better, just like body slam Pickford to get in the net. But another goal for Wissa, Dan. Could argue it was against the run of play, but I actually think we had the better of the first half. Another goal for Wissa, and we go in at 1-0. What were your thoughts at half time?
Like I said at the start, it seemed like things were going our way for once, and not many Brentford fans would tell you that happens very often, especially after their missed chances and they're scoring at the perfect time just before the break when Everton think they're going in at 0-0. I think the minute they let that throw-in drop and bounce to the floor, they're in a bit of trouble. The amount of big defenders they have, they shouldn't be letting that happen. Bryan Mbeumo perhaps should score the initial attempt, but then it's this great great desire from Wissa to get there first. Great reactions. He scores all types of goals. Really, he can do that effort from the edge of the box, and he had another go at that, which Pickford parried wide. But he can also score the scruffy goals. He's often in the right place at the right time. Sometimes he's caught offside a little bit too much for my liking, but you know, when he times it right, he can score scruffy goals like that. And yeah, he's quite good in the air as well for a man who's a little bit vertically challenged compared to the centre backs around him. Obviously, he had that other header, didn't he, earlier in the first half, which perhaps he didn't quite get the power or the connection he wanted. But yeah, good from him. I'm not surprised his highest scoring season, given that he's playing down the middle in what I think is his best position. He's playing regularly. He's got such a great relationship with the other front players, and I think as a four, we're just a lot more dynamic now than when Ivan Toney was leading the line. And it is better to watch. I think it's definitely better to watch, and at times it just functions a little bit better. And it helps all of them. Damsgaard helps all of them as well because he puts so much on a plate for them. But that's why we've got, you know, two of the top, I think 6 or 7 goal scorers in the Premier League at the moment.
We're going to talk about Damsgaard because I actually thought he had one of his quieter games. The second half was different. I think Everton came into it a bit more. They were getting opportunities on the break. Alcaraz was causing us problems when we turned over the ball in midfield. But I actually thought Damsgaard had a quieter game, and I put it in our WhatsApp chat. And literally, as that happened, Wissa's goal got disallowed, and that would have been, I think, his assist of the season so far. Craig, it's KLP has to shoot there. He has to shoot. And maybe, you know, if he'd got a few more goals this season, if he was playing his preferred position, we'll never know. But maybe he would have had the confidence to take that on first time and slot it past Pickford. But we kind of know what KLP is like in the final areas. Just on Damsgaard in general, Mo Salah bagged his 17th assist of the season yesterday with that win over Newcastle. And I think he's got over 20 goals already as well. So that man's just insane. And we kind of said at the start of the season, has Damsgaard got a chance of getting the Playmaker of the Season award? I just don't think he has anymore because Mo Salah just gets better and better every week. But just talk us through your thoughts about that opportunity, Craig, because, you know, Frank said it in his post-match. If that goes in, I think we go on to win the game and see it out, to be honest.
Yeah. What I will say is after, gosh, I can't even remember which one it was. I think it was the Everton game. The West Ham game. We were talking about Mikel Damsgaard, and we said that he goes on one of those mazy runs at least once a game. And he did one, I want to say it was in the first half, right in front of the North Stand, where he's got 3 players around him and he jinks his feet in and out and gets away from 3 of the players. And then I think he nutmegs Harrison as well to get it out to Keane. But he's so enjoyable to watch. And even when he has an off day, shall we say, he's still enjoyable to watch. First things first, can we address how people aren't quite sure as how the offside rule works still? And I'd like to point out that just because we call them goalkeepers does not mean they are not players. There are 2 players between the ball and the goal when the ball is played, between the attacking player and the goal when the ball is played. If there is not 2 players between them, then it is offside. Wissa is very clearly offside because he is stood inside the 6-yard box with 1 Everton player. It is offside. 2 players.
Tell Keane Lewis-Potter that.
Yeah, he should have shot. I have no idea why he hasn't shot. He brings the ball under his control really, really well. Jinks past Pickford, and all he has to do is slot it into the net with I think it might have been Jack O'Brien who was stood on the line in the end, and just slot it into the net. Now, I don't know if he maybe thinks he's a lot further away from goal than what he actually was, or what. But that baffled me. That did baffle me, and it was so clearly offside as well to start with. But if we score that goal, we're 2-0 ahead. I think that was after about 75 to 80 minutes. If we go into the last 10 minutes 2-0 up, I think we see out that game very comfortably, and we're having a different conversation now, talking about 3 wins on the bounce, 3 points off of 8th. But football is a fickle man's game, and it's easy to criticize. Keane obviously didn't think he was in the right position to shoot, but football, man, what are you going to do?
Yeah, it would have. I do think we probably would have held on for the win if it have slotted that away. And yeah, that Damsgaard assist would have been glorious as well. That disguised little pass back inside would have been unreal. But we move on. We'll talk about their goal. And I think there was a little bit of debate in our chat around who was to blame for that. I think I've watched it back now a couple of times. Pinnock and Collins were like doubling up on Beto in the box, who was just causing a little bit of mayhem in there. The ball comes over, KLP drifts inside, and Paris Magoma loses his man. And I know that there's a lot of anger towards Paris Magoma, Dan, having just come on the pitch. I do have a little bit of empathy for him, but am I being too generous there? Does he just have to switch on and just stick with his man?
I have empathy for him as well. I mean, Keane Lewis-Potter doesn't just come inside; he comes way inside to the extent he's more inside than Pinnock is. So I don't think he should be drifting as far into the middle as that. Also, Jake O'Brien is absolutely massive. So, to be honest, whether Keane Lewis-Potter or Paris Magoma are there, I can't see a scenario where Jake O'Brien doesn't get on the end of that. Unfortunately, I would like to see Magoma try to engage or try to go for the header. He didn't really do that. Maybe he could have done a little bit more to just, try and put him off, get on him, but he didn't do that. But he had only been on, I think you said, for about a minute. And I don't think it's unusual. You just got yourself into the game. Sometimes you do need a bit of time just to settle into the game, particularly a young player like him. But I do think O'Brien would have scored no matter whether it was KLP at the back post or whether Magoma was at the back post, because he's massive.
It is a strange one, because when you watch it back, firstly, I think we also need to criticize the amount of time that Mykolenko is given on the edge of our penalty area, because that was an unchallenged cross. He had zero pressure on him. He had time to take a touch, time to get his head up, time to cross the ball. But the weird thing is, when the ball is played to Mykolenko, Magoma is between Jake O'Brien and the goal. And then a moment later, obviously, Jake O'Brien gets around him. But like you say, he's that big. He kind of just runs into Magoma and Magoma, and he's past him. Magoma just spins and he's in anyway. But the issue starts not necessarily from when the goal is scored, but from stopping the ball going into the box in the first place. It's far too easy for them to put crosses into the box. Well, that cross in particular, anyway.
And I noticed it as well in the second half, especially being 1-0 up. And there's been a little bit made. John McKenzie we had on the podcast before the start of the season. You and I, Craig, were on that pod with him. Yeah. And I saw him tweet a while ago saying he's like really disappointed with how passive Brentford have been out of possession this season, in terms of letting opposition get on top of us in our final third and put crosses into the box. I just thought at 1-0 up, Everton were pushing. Can we stop that cross getting into the box? Can we just push up the pitch a little bit more? Maybe it's due to the fact that we're tired legs or we've been running quite a bit. But it has been a general theme this season, especially like when Arsenal came to the Gtech, when Man City came to the Gtech. We were really happy to just let them kind of have the ball in our defensive third, and Wissa was back and Mbeumo was back. And then when we finally turn over possession, everyone's so fucking far back that there's no options to go to when we go up the pitch. It kind of felt like that yesterday, even though it was maybe a little bit less pronounced than the City and Arsenal games, Dan. It did feel like at times you're just thinking, just get up the pitch and stop that cross coming in, which is what I think the defensive coaches, when they look at that goal back, they'll be so frustrated with, because it's so avoidable, that goal, from the marking on Jake O'Brien with Paris Magoma to the, like you pointed out, Craig, to stopping the Mykolenko cross coming in, Dan.
Yeah, we are passive at times. I think at times we try and press, but then at times we do sit in that low block. And I think also at times we struggle with transitions, which I think we saw a little bit at Leicester on Friday night. I think it's something we're trying to work on. I think very much that, I think Thomas Frank has said before that that's a little bit of a weaker area of our game, and we don't do enough to engage players at times, and it can be frustrating. And that's part of the reason why we've conceded so many shots. They might not have been from the best position, but Mark Flecken's made, I think, the second most saves in the league, and we've conceded the second most amount of shots. And given those bottom three teams in particular, to think that two of them have faced less shots than us this season, it's a little bit of a concern. It's, what we do generally works for us in terms of where we are in the table. But again, I think to get to that next step, we do need to cut that out a bit more. We need to be a bit more active. It's good to get bodies behind the ball, but if they're not doing a lot, then is it that good? It can be difficult to break down, but we got to engage a bit more, win the ball back quicker, and then break quicker. And it's difficult without that out ball, without someone like Thiago up front, particularly when O'Brien's at right back. And I think Schade's aerial ability was therefore nullified in this one just because of who is up against. So it's difficult, and I think that's the next stage of our development as a team. Definitely into next season, that's something we need to get better at.
We'll talk about. I don't want to talk any more about Ethan Pinnock because I think you pointed out, Dan, especially that chance late on where Beto, he has the jump on Beto by a good sort of 5-10 yards. I couldn't work out whether Ethan's just lost a lot of pace or Beto is just very, very fast. It's probably a mixture of both, but again, Flekken makes the big save. I thought that Vitali chance at the end was big from that long throw when he got lopped into the box, and then he kind of just air kicks. He kind of just misses it. But I was thinking, someone who's got a sweet left foot like Vitali does, it popped up for him nicely, and he kind of just misses the ball. I was gutted with that one. I really thought that might be the winner in the last minute. But you mentioned Schade there, Dan. Let's go through some players. I thought Schade in the first half, it was really nice to see him because we kind of criticised him. I think it was against Spurs, particularly in the second half when he kind of just stopped running at Pedro Porro for whatever reason. But Craig, I thought last night in that first half, whenever he got the ball, even in the second half, he got his head down and just ran at his fullback. And if Jake O'Brien hadn't have got that equaliser, you would have said that Schade had definitely got the better of him, at least in their individual battle. But Schade, another good performance from him. And I like the fact that now it's goals and its performances as well, even though he doesn't get on the score sheet, Craig.
Yeah, it's consistency, isn't it? It's consistency for Conan Schade. And it helps that he's, I'm going to say this now because there's a lot of Twitter talk that he asked to go off, didn't he?
Yeah, I saw someone say that. Is that true? I didn't see that.
I didn't see it, but the rumors are he asked to go off. So hopefully that doesn't mean he was feeling something and he picked up something, because what I was going to say is it helped him being fit. It helps him being fit and getting a run of games. When he's having this broken season that he had last year where he was fit, unfit, in and out of the squad, it didn't help his game at all. But this season, this last sort of 10 to 15 games where he's playing consistently, he's getting a lot of minutes and he's getting goals, it's really good for him. It's good for his confidence. And that shows in situations like we had yesterday when the ball comes into his feet and immediately his first touch is forward, get past the player, run at the player. A couple of times the ball's come over to his side and his first touch was brilliant. But we used to make jokes about him last season saying that his first touch is so good, but he always chases after his second touch. But it was brilliant from him. And I'm glad that he's getting this run of form, getting a few goals, getting involved. And hopefully, I mean, he's 3 goals off of 10 goals for this season as well. So we could end the season with 3 players with 10 or more goals.
I think that's eight goals in 14 or 15 starts for Kevin Schade. It was actually a really good return. Obviously, the caveats that he scored 3 in one game against Leicester. But onto another forward player, Bryan Mbeumo. For those watching on YouTube, I've pulled up Gaff's tweet that got a little bit of attention post-match. For those listening, I'll read it out. He said, "I want to say something controversial that's been bugging me, and I know I'll get shit. I absolutely love Bryan, and he works hard. And yes, I sound spoiled moaning about him because he's saved our bacon a hell of a lot this season. But I can't help but feel recently his performances haven't been up to par. Since Southampton, poor against Spurs, poor against Liverpool, poor against West Ham, poor against Everton last night. Poor against Palace and got lucky to score a retaken penalty. And bar the banger against Leicester, I wasn't blown away. He's been insanely clinical and has stepped up in the big moments to save us. But I think performances overall recently have dropped off. Thoughts to either of you?
I think he's always lacked that bit of consistency. I think we've said ourselves there's games that he has at times where he continually cuts in, tries to put a cross in the box, but the cross either doesn't beat the first man or goes over everyone. And then sometimes, he'll get those opportunities where he cuts in, he goes for the effort. Recently, until he listened to the podcast, he was going for the near post far too regularly. And a lot of them were just being picked up by the keeper. And I think it's definitely a problem he'll have at a bigger club. Like, we don't substitute him. I think himself probably quite confident he knows he'll get to the end of a game, but bigger clubs won't be as patient with that. You got the likes of Salah, who can be quiet in games to Liverpool, but then he always seems to pop up with something at some point, even when he's quiet. And I know it's potentially asking a lot of Bryan because Salah's one of the best in the world, but to get to that next level, that's what he needs to add to his game. It's okay sometimes if he's having a quiet game. It happens to attacking players, especially if, it's a difficult game and we're not necessarily on top and he doesn't get loads of chances. But when one or two of those chances comes, particularly against the better teams, he needs to start putting some of them away. He won't get 5 or 6 chances every game. I think it's much easier to look good when we win in 5-0 away at Southampton. When you get chance after chance after chance and the opposition aren't very good, you're bound to create something, and you can also miss a few as well, and no one will really notice because you've ended up with a couple of goals and an assist. But yeah, I think we've always kind of said that, and I don't think he should be exempt to being substituted either. We've got Fabio Carvalho on the bench, and I'm sure we'll talk about him. It's another game where he just hasn't managed to get any minutes in a game where we're struggling and we need a goal. It's all well and good giving him half an hour against Leicester when we're 3-0 up, mainly just to rest someone else. We've signed a player for 15 to 20 million pounds here, and we've got to be using him to try and give us another creative solution towards the end of games.
Just before we talk about Carvalho, because I've got a few things to say about it. It's particularly, just before we talk about Carvalho, where do we think Bryan ends up? Do we think
still Liverpool, perhaps?
Liverpool?
Salah's still uncertain, isn't he? But if not, maybe Newcastle.
I saw some rumours, Craig, about Newcastle, about them giving the green light to talk to him over the summer.
Yeah.
How much do you want? 60?
Between 50 and 60, yeah. To tempt. I mean, I think if 60 is the figure, it's got to be like 55 plus 5 with add-ons and things like that. So if we could get to the summer, and I don't think it will happen. I really don't think it will happen. Then we lose both Wissa and Mbeumo. We lose one or the other. But if we get the right offer, we know what Brentford are like. We're a selling club. If we get the right offer, if we can get between 90 and 100 million for Bryan and Wissa, I see us selling both and reinvesting. But if we look ahead to next season, we've got players coming back in. I say back. We've got
players coming in.
We've got players coming in. I mean, we've got Thiago, who hopefully is going to be fit, but whenever. Gustavo Nunes, who's going to be fit whenever. I don't even know where he plays anymore. I've forgotten Gustavo Nunes. So someone can enlighten me on that one.
I think he was left. No, he plays right. He plays on the right because he's one of those wingers that doesn't actually come in and cut inside. I want to say. I think he's a right winger who's right-footed, who likes to hit the line and actually cross balls in like that, which would be a kind of throwback. So whether Thomas Frank deploys him on the left because he prefers a winger who cuts in and can hurt teams with the crosses, we shall see. But you're absolutely right. We're waiting for him to come in, not come back.
We're not even waiting for him to come back. We're waiting for him to come in. Yeah. You've also got. Oh God knows what's going to happen with players like Josh Da Silva next season. Hopefully, we give him an opportunity if he gets back to some level of fitness. Touch wood, but yeah. I mean, if we could get between 90 and 100 million for those two players, I can see them going. I can see us reinvesting, but we need to have a big summer next year. This summer we need to have a big summer because it's very clear over the last couple of seasons that we don't have the squad depth to be able to really challenge for what we want to be able to challenge. But yeah, Newcastle. I'm kind of in the boat that I don't want Bryan to play for someone in England because I don't want us to have to play against him in the same way I was with Ivan Toney. But I mean, 50, 60 million is 50, 60 million. It goes a long way for a club like us as well. So I hope he doesn't. We might get lucky and tie him down to a new contract. Who knows? But yeah, I think that I'm set on this being his last season with Brentford, Bryan Mbeumo.
Yeah, I think some people are still hanging on to the fact that he might stay. I just don't see a world where he's on course to score 20 plus goals this season and he doesn't get cherry picked by one of the better teams in the division. I don't know. I don't understand how people are still thinking that he's going to be at the club next season. I hope him prove wrong though, because we'd love to keep on to him, keep a hold of him for another season. But Dan, you mentioned Carvalho, right? And I was like, I do not understand, because with some of the players that we've had, like the fringe players that maybe haven't as kicked on as much, like in the first couple of years of their tenure at Brentford, your Mikel Damsgaard, your Keane Lewis-Potters, even when they weren't breaking into the team, they were still getting minutes. They were still getting substantial minutes in games. Damsgaard would start the odd game here and there, as would KLP. But I don't know, Thomas Frank just must not fancy him, because like in that game especially, you mentioned Craig earlier about us pumping the ball into the box. A player that won't do that and will try something different is Fabio Carvalho, because I don't think he's a little bit more cute than just kind of pumping it into the box and hoping that something drops for us. But Dan, it is, I don't know what more he can do really with the minutes that he's been provided.
No, I don't know whether there's something going on behind the scenes, where how hard he works in training. I saw a few murmurs that when he played for the B team last week, until he scored, there were some journalists reporting on it saying that he didn't seem overly interested. I think he was playing slightly out of position on the right-hand side. And it's not necessarily a good look when you're one of those senior players stepping up or stepping down to the B team. So I don't know whether there's something behind the scenes, but we clearly feel able to give him minutes against Leicester, substantial minutes against Leicester. So it's not an issue that, he's completely out of the team, completely out of favour, doesn't deserve to play. Everyone seemed very, very pleased with him when he got that goal against Leicester, but it's almost meaningless in terms of whether we actually believing him. It's meaningless bringing him on for half an hour against Leicester when we're 3-0 up, when you're also bringing a load of other young players on, and it just comes across like you're looking to rest other players who have come off for the Everton game. And I just don't understand, given the lack of options on the bench. It's not like there's 2 or 3 other attacking options that we might favour over him. I thought as soon as Mbeumo came on and as soon as Everton scored, then perhaps we could have stuck Mbeumo in that deeper role and taken Yarmo off, particularly after he picked up the yellow card, and just had Carvalho in and around Damsgaard to see if we could just create something. I don't think there's an awful lot to lose by doing that. I think the potential rewards of getting the late winner would have been worth it. And if Thomas Frank doesn't fancy him in those situations, which is precisely what he should have been brought in for, then it's really tough to see. And I can understand if he's getting frustrated, because he's moved from Liverpool for similar reasons as Sepp van den Berg. He's seeing Sepp van den Berg start every week, and he's not really getting any further than he perhaps would have got even at Liverpool. Like, he probably would have been in some match day squads, probably would have played some minutes here and there, especially in the cup. And that's quite something. He's someone that's done it in the Championship before. The next step is for him to play in the Premier League. I do think he's got the quality to be good enough. He just needs to settle in the side. But how's he going to do that if we're not giving him the minutes?
Rumors are, this is based on a few people that I've spoken to in and around the club, is Fabio is actually happy to earn his place in the team, and he is happy at Brentford, and he understands what Thomas Frank is saying. And I don't agree with the phrase being dumped with the B team when he's played minutes for them. And we've just bought Coyote in as well, and he's playing for the B team there. So it's the terms, isn't it, being used? But rumours are he's happy at the club. He's happy to earn his place in the team. But The only reason I feel a bit sorry for him is because of how well Damsgaard's doing, how well Wissa is doing, how well Bryan is doing, how well Schade is doing. The thing is, at the moment, is he doesn't fit in that team. The thing is, he doesn't fit. If I don't even want to say it. If something was to happen to someone, whomever, then he would get a look in. But yeah, rumors are he's actually happy. He's looking to earn his place in the team. But obviously, there's just frustrations that he's not getting as many minutes as he wanted to.
It's hard to earn it, isn't it? It's hard to earn it when you're not getting those minutes because, it takes something like you to come on in this sort of game to make an impact, to then earn a starting spot in the future. And if he's not getting those opportunities, I could understand if he was frustrated. And if he's happy and he's willing to stick with it, that's just a good sign of his character. But I could understand if he is frustrated because he's not getting those opportunities to prove himself.
Let's talk about the bigger picture a little bit, because as Sam posted it at the top, we are on 38 points. For those watching on YouTube, I pulled up the Premier League table. We're on 38 points. If we'd have won last night, we'd have still been in that kind of mix of like basically third all the way down to Villa in 10th. So Forest on 48, Villa on 42 in 10th. And then in the middle of that, Newcastle on 44, Bournemouth on 43, Brighton on 43, Fulham on 42, Villa on 42, and us on 38. Palace, to an extent, with the form that they're in at the moment, they're probably still in with a shout of it as well, having spanked Villa 4-1 in midweek. Dan, where I know that you've lost a bit of optimism because Europe's back on. That phrase, we haven't heard that in a while. So you must not be thinking that we can do it. Where are you with it?
I think we'll slightly miss out. I mean, you look at those, just the amount of games we won and the amount of games we lost. We scream, bang mid-table. I feel like we've been 11th for as long as I can remember now. And it is those results against those teams above us. There's very few of those teams above us, apart from Newcastle and Bournemouth, have we beaten this season, I believe. So,
Correct.
We're going to need to do better than that to get into those top 8 positions. There's so many teams involved. We're going to need to go on a better run than at least 3 of them. Hope none of the others go on an even better run than us. And I think it will be difficult, but there's no time to prove me wrong than now, because in the next 3-4 weeks we play teams, a lot of the teams above us, and we've got to start getting some wins in those games. We've got to do it. I think we've been so consistent against those bottom teams this season. Largely we've lost 1 or 2, but generally we've been so consistent against those bottom teams, and I just haven't seen that level of consistency or the level of performance against the very best teams or the European challenging teams to really convince me that we'll go on the run necessary, because we need to gain 4 points on them, and these are teams that do win fairly regularly. We need to gain 4 points on them before we're even really in and around it. So we've got to do that, and then we've got to maintain some kind of form to stay in those places.
Craig, something funny. Did you burst out laughing there?
Yeah, it's just Dad saying, "Oh, okay, we've got to play a few of these top teams. We've got, of the 11 games that we've got left, 8 are top 10.
Go on, list them off.
So obviously, our next home game in 2 weeks is Villa at home, who are 10th. They're Bournemouth away and Newcastle away in back-to-back games, but there's another break in between those for internationals, and then we play Chelsea at home and Arsenal away, Brighton at home, Forest away, and then we go to the bottom half of the table with United at home and Ipswich away, and then Fulham at home, which is the penultimate game of the season, and then Wolves away. So we play 8 of the top 10 and 3 of the bottom 10. So we're in a situation now where we are fighting with teams in and around us where we need to be picking up points. Let's be very, very realistic here. We're not going to go down. We're not really going to finish Europe, but we could give ourselves a little bit of a chance, a fighting chance going into it, if we can pick up points against teams around us.
Just looking at those teams around us, do you think we're better than we might need to be better than 2 of them essentially, because ninth might get Europe. Am I right in saying that ninth could be Conference League this season?
I thought it was eighth. Yeah.
Is it eighth? Right. Okay.
Yeah,
Eighth. Are we better than kind of three of those teams above us? We've already beaten Bournemouth this season. Be interesting when we play Fulham at home, considering what happened in the last game. Fucking hell. Just reminded myself of that. Like when we played Chelsea in the last 20 minutes, I thought we were the better team. Took us a bit of time to wake up. Dan's looking at me like, shut up, you're a dickhead.
They've got a 4 or 5 point head start. So it's not just the fact that are we better than them? They're 4 or 5 points, better off at this stage of the season. And their fixtures, I haven't studied all their individual fixtures, but if they've got more favourable fixtures than us, then you'd probably back them to do it over us. I think we're probably a very similar standard to the likes of Bournemouth, Brighton, Fulham, even Villa this season. And Forest as well look like they're dropping off a little bit, but they're just too far ahead already, I think, for us to get near them. So I just don't see us being consistent enough against all these sides week by week by week. I think we will beat one or two of them. I do back us to do that, but I don't think we will
run together.
We've probably got to win, maybe against 5 of the top 8, 5 of those 8 top half games, perhaps, to really give us a chance. And I can't necessarily see that given where we are and the points gap already between us and 8th.
Just a quick one on the summer. I just added it into the running order. But say that Bryan leaves, Wissa, I think, will leave in the summer, if I'm being honest. Where do we need to strengthen? And obviously I think a lot of this hinges on fitness, particularly Thiago, basically, coming back, and Gustavo Nunes as well, because I do think those two in the summer were supposed to be kind of big marquee signings, and we are yet to see either of them. But where do we need to strengthen in the summer, do you think? If we get, because obviously we're going to get the big cash injection from Bryan Mbeumo, I think that's like a foregone conclusion. Where do we need to see that money invested in terms of positions to any of you, either of you?
I think there's no obvious replacement for Bryan, is there? I think that's the obvious one.
Mbappe, that'll do.
Yeah.
Go on, what'd you say?
Mbappe will do. Yeah.
Yeah, that'd be fun. You could get him on a cut price. So what you're thinking, right wing? I think we probably need some cover at centre half, if I'm honest, with Ethan faltering a little bit. Anywhere else on the pitch? Would you say Coyote's one?
I think that we make Coyote a permanent signing in the summer. I think that we make Coyote a permanent signing, and I think that if we keep Rico fit and we keep Aaron Hickey fit next season, we've got cover, because we've got Keane, we've got Rico, we've got Coyote, we've got Hickey. I don't think fullback wise, I can't believe saying this after this season, we will have a problem next year. The club seem to rate a lot of the B team defenders quite highly. So if we have a defensive unit of Nathan Collins, Sepp Vandenberg, Chris Ayer, Ethan Pinnock being that, senior role that Ben Mee has done this season, plus maybe Jisoo as well, stepping more into it, because he's impressed me when he's played in the cup games that he has as well. For me, it's actually in midfield that we might need to bring a player or two in, because I can see next season being Norgar's last season for us, and we need to find a good 6 replacement, because I'm not set on a full season with Janelt and Yarmo as a good 6 replacement. Personally, I think we need an out-and-out defensive midfielder. So look at a defensive midfielder. I don't think we need to worry about going forward, because we've got Fabio who can step in as well. We've got Damsgaard. We've got Jensen, who obviously needs to remain fit. Maybe a forward player, but I think a defensive midfielder, and a wide player or two.
Dan, agree with that?
Yeah, I think maybe another centre back as well. I think you could also think about left backs, but I think Meg Homer's doing all right at Preston as well at the moment. So maybe we can get by. I'm not sure if we see Lewis-Potter's future at left back or left wing. A decision will have to be made there. But if it is left wing, and if we do want to bring him back there, I'm not necessarily sure we'll be able to rely on Rico. I think we'll need to see some evidence before we can really rely on him. Meg Homer, it'll probably be a bit too soon for him. So we might want to get a left back in if Meghomer's not ready yet, and if we can't rely on Rico, and if we want KLP to be an attacking option next season. But otherwise, yeah, I think the Norgard replacement, perhaps even someone who can play the in-out role as well alongside Norgard for the time being. And then right wing, I don't think there's an obvious Bryan replacement apart from Gustavo Nunes. But again, he's a very young player. I wouldn't expect him to come in and be a starter week in, week out. So I think we need, a first team ready, proven right winger. Because if we lose Wissa and Mbeumo, we lose a lot of goals. And although we've seen good things from Thiago, I'm not sure how many actual goals he'll score. I think he'll be a good target man. He'll be a good link player. But, will he get you 15, 20 a season? We don't know. He's not scored for us yet. So we need someone on that right wing who can come in and will contribute goals and will help replace that, which is really difficult to find. I appreciate that. But we've got to do it. The sort of sum we're looking at getting in for Bryan Mbeumo, should mean we have, the funds to, potentially even go up to about 40 million on a replacement, which we might need to do because it's such a big role to fill if Bryan leaves.
Quickly before we finish, because I realise we've been banging on for about an hour now, but Aston Villa up next after the FA Cup weekend. I think that fixture for them will come each side of their Champions League game against Club Brugge. So expect maybe a weakened Aston Villa side, potentially, depending on their first result in the away leg, which is at Club Brugge, I believe. How are you feeling about that, Craig?
It's difficult to call, isn't it? Like Dan says, you don't really know where we're at when we play teams that are in and around us. I like to think that we're good enough to beat them, especially with the games that they've got in and around playing us. But I've watched Brentford for long enough to know that we could beat them. We could beat them quite comfortably. We could very easily go the other direction and lose quite comfortably as well. So I do think with the run of form that we're on, we're unbeaten in 3. We didn't lose at home. They've got a few tough fixtures in and around there. I'd like to say that we could do it. Like to say we could.
It's a difficult one again, because I think when they're at their very best, they do probably have a better team than us, and also Fulham, Bournemouth, the likes of those teams. I think they are a better side. They've strengthened really well in January. They have better depth. So, the likes of Marcus Rashford and Marco Asensio haven't necessarily been starting lately. So, if they're on the bench against Bruges, then I expect them to start against us. And will that really make them much weaker? I don't think so. I think, if anything, they'll get stronger the way those two have started. So I think it almost depends on which Aston Villa side turns up. I think if they're on it, then it will be a really, really difficult game. But they have shown vulnerabilities lately. They do struggle to string results together. They can be inconsistent. So if that version of them turns up, I think, we've got a really, really good chance. And our front four, if they're not quite on it, if any team in the Premier League aren't quite on it, our front four are there and that they will take advantage.
Be the first time Ollie Watkins might see that fella in the crowd that he was pointing to last time he scored that goal at the Gtech. That'd be fun. I think that'd be a good point to wrap up the podcast, chaps. We'll be back for a Villa preview later next week, so keep your eyes peeled for that. Just before we go, remember to drop a comment down below with your thoughts on both the Leicester and the Everton game. 2 points dropped, 1 gained. Let us know in the comment section below. Subscribe to the YouTube and Spotify channels. Follow us on the socials, at the Elam Road on Twitter, at Elam Road Pod on Instagram. Gents, a pleasure as always.
Up the bees.
Up the bees.